She had spent a lifetime watching the world misunderstand strength. People often think strength is loud, aggressive, demanding to be seen. But she knew better. She had lived proof that the quietest people often carry the heaviest storms, and the deepest wisdom is rarely shouted. When Elon Musk's mother finally chose to speak, it wasn't because she wanted attention. It wasn't because she needed validation. It was because she sensed something shifting in the air, something fragile and important, something about you. She has watched success up close, not as a fantasy but as a daily discipline. She has seen ambition burn people alive and also watched it build futures when guided with patience. For decades, she stood slightly to the side, observing, learning, enduring her own trials long before the world ever learned her son's name. When she speaks now, her voice carries the weight of lived truth, not theory. And this time, her words are not about Elon. They are about you. She wants you to understand something most people never realize until it's almost too late. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not failing because your life doesn't look like someone else's highlight reel. She has seen what happens behind closed doors, the years of isolation, rejection, ridicule, and doubt that come before anything meaningful ever takes shape. What you see as delay is often protection. What you feel as invisibility is often preparation. She knows what it feels like to be underestimated. She knows what it means to be strong in silence while the world rushes past you, assuming you have nothing to offer. She has been there, raising children as a single mother, rebuilding life from nothing, being told repeatedly what she could not do, what her limits were supposed to be. And yet she learned that the most dangerous thing you can do is accept other people's definitions of your potential. Her message to you is simple, but it cuts deep. Stop apologizing for becoming. Stop explaining your dreams to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. She has seen how many brilliant, kind, capable people give up not because they lack ability, but because they absorb too much noise. The world is full of opinions that sound like wisdom but are actually fear in disguise. If you listen too closely, you will shrink yourself to fit rooms you were meant to outgrow. She wants you to know that struggle is not a sign you chose the wrong path. Often, it's confirmation that you chose a meaningful one. Easy roads rarely lead anywhere worth going. She has watched her son sleep on factory floors, face public humiliation, risk everything repeatedly, not because he enjoyed suffering, but because purpose demanded endurance. And she has lived her own version of that truth in quieter, less visible ways. When she speaks about resilience, she is not romanticizing pain. She is honoring survival. She wants you to stop being ashamed of how much you've been through. Those scars you hide are evidence of adaptation, not weakness. You didn't break when life tried to break you. You learned. You adjusted. You kept going, even when no one was applauding. She is especially speaking to the part of you that feels unseen. The part that wonders if anyone would notice if you stop trying. She wants you to know that invisibility does not mean insignificance. Some of the most important work happens away from the spotlight. Seeds grow in the dark long before anyone sees a forest. She also wants to warn you gently. Do not let bitterness take root in your heart. Disappointment is inevitable, but cynicism is optional. She has seen people lose their way not because they failed, but because they allowed resentment to harden them. Protect your curiosity. Protect your kindness. These are not weaknesses in a competitive world, they are sources of endurance. Her words carry a mother's clarity, the kind that cuts through illusion without cruelty. She reminds you that success is not linear. It does not arrive on schedule, and it does not follow rules that make sense to outsiders. If your life feels messy right now, that does not mean it is meaningless. Often, it means it is alive. She wants you to stop comparing your beginning to someone else's middle. You don't know the price they paid, the nights they doubted themselves, the relationships they sacrificed, the risks that almost destroyed them. Comparison is a thief that steals joy and replaces it with urgency that isn't yours. There is also something else she wants you to hear. Something deeply personal. You do not need permission to take your life seriously. You don't need unanimous approval to pursue what matters to you. Waiting for validation is one of the fastest ways to abandon yourself. She learned long ago that self-trust is built by action, not consensus. She speaks to you as someone who understands what it means to rebuild identity more than once. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to outgrow who you used to be. You are allowed to disappoint people who only loved the version of you that was convenient for them. Growth is not betrayal. She reminds you that discipline is more important than motivation. Motivation fades. Discipline carries you through days when belief feels thin. Small, consistent effort compounds into outcomes that look miraculous from the outside. She has watched this truth play out again and again, in careers, in health, in character, and then she softens, because she knows life is not only about endurance. She wants you to rest without guilt. To stop treating exhaustion as a badge of honor. Burnout does not prove commitment. It only proves imbalance. You are not a machine. Even the strongest systems require maintenance. She encourages you to surround yourself with people who challenge you without diminishing you. Support does not mean agreement, it means respect. Choose environments where your ambition is not mocked and your sensitivity is not exploited. Where growth is normal, not threatening. Her message is also a reminder that failure is not final. It is data. Information. Feedback. The only real failure is refusing to learn. She has seen public failures turn into private lessons that later changed entire industries. What feels humiliating today may become foundational tomorrow. She looks at the world and sees too many people abandoning their inner voice because it doesn't shout loudly enough. She urges you to listen more carefully. That quiet pull towards something meaningful is not random. It's your responsibility calling you forward. She wants you to know that you don't need to be fearless. Courage is not the absence of fear, it's movement despite fear. If you're scared, it means you care. If you care, you're alive. Don't numb yourself to avoid discomfort. Growth requires feeling. Her words are not dramatic, but they are steady. She is not promising you fame, wealth, or recognition. She is offering something more durable, self-respect. The kind that comes from knowing you didn't abandon yourself when things got hard. She speaks to the version of you that is tired of pretending everything is fine. You don't have to perform strength. Real strength is honesty with yourself. Admit what you want. Admit what hurts. Admit what you're afraid of. Clarity begins there, and finally, she leaves you with this thought. The world does not need you to be a copy of someone else's success story. It needs your perspective, your resilience, your way of seeing problems and possibilities. There is room for you, even if it doesn't look like it yet. She didn't speak to impress. She spoke to remind. To remind you that becoming takes time, that struggle is not a verdict, and that your story is still unfolding. And if you listen closely, beneath all the noise and doubt, you might realize something important. She would want to continue by telling you something most people never hear from someone who has actually lived through uncertainty without guarantees. She would tell you that the world rewards those who stay standing long enough to be counted. Not those who rush, not those who shout the loudest, but those who refuse to disappear when things get uncomfortable. She has seen how many people quit quietly, not because they failed, but because they became tired of waiting for proof that their effort mattered. She knows waiting is heavy. Waiting without applause. Waiting without reassurance. Waiting while others seem to move ahead effortlessly. She wants you to understand that patience is not passive. It is one of the most active forms of strength. Every day you show up without knowing the outcome, you are training your nervous system to trust yourself. That trust will matter more than talent when pressure arrives. She would also speak about loneliness, because she knows it well. There is a specific loneliness that comes with choosing a different path. You can be surrounded by people and still feel profoundly alone because no one around you truly understands what you are building or why it matters to you. She wants you to know that this loneliness is not punishment. It is often the cost of originality. She has watched how society celebrates results but ignores the years of obscurity that shape a person's character. She wants you to stop resenting those quiet years. They are shaping how you think, how you decide, how you recover. Without them, success would crush you instead of expand you. She would tell you to pay attention to how you speak to yourself. The private language you use in moments of frustration becomes the architecture of your future confidence. If you constantly tell yourself you are behind, incapable, or unlucky, your mind will start building evidence to support that story. Change the story, and behavior will follow. She knows you've questioned your worth when things didn't work out. She knows you've replayed conversations, opportunities, mistakes, wondering what you could have done differently. She wants you to stop using hindsight as a weapon against yourself. Reflection is meant to guide, not punish. She would remind you that adaptability is more valuable than any single plan. Life will interrupt you. Markets will change. People will disappoint you. The ability to pivot without losing your identity is what separates those who endure from those who collapse when certainty disappears. She has seen how pressure exposes character. When things go wrong, some people become cruel, rigid, and defensive. Others become curious, flexible, and resilient. She urges you to choose the second path deliberately. Hard moments are invitations to evolve, not excuses to harden. She wants you to take responsibility for your energy. Not everything deserves your emotional investment. You don't need to attend every argument, prove every point, or respond to every provocation. Protecting your focus is not avoidance, it is strategy. She would also tell you that it's okay to want more. Wanting growth does not make you ungrateful. Wanting change does not mean you hate where you are. Ambition and gratitude can coexist. You can appreciate the present while still preparing for a different future. She knows that sometimes you doubt whether your effort is making any difference at all. Progress often hides until it suddenly becomes obvious. Skills compound quietly. Relationships deepen slowly. Trust builds through repeated small actions. Nothing meaningful arrives fully formed. She would caution you against glamorizing other people's lives. Every path includes trade-offs that are invisible from the outside. What you envy in someone else may come with sacrifices you wouldn't want if you saw the full picture. Choose consciously, not emotionally. She also wants you to hear this clearly. You are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to step away from environments that drain you, even if others don't understand your reasons. Your nervous system matters. Your mental clarity matters. Sustainability matters. She understands how easy it is to internalize rejection as proof of inadequacy. She wants you to reframe it. Rejection often means misalignment, not deficiency. Not every door is meant to open for you, because not every room is meant to contain you. She would speak about courage again, but differently this time. Courage is not always dramatic. Sometimes it's sending the email you've been avoiding. Sometimes it's saying no when you've always said yes. Sometimes it's admitting you need help. These small acts reshape your life more than grand gestures ever will. She has learned that consistency beats intensity. A little effort every day outperforms occasional bursts of obsession. Don't underestimate what steady progress can do over time. Momentum is built quietly. She wants you to stop treating rest as failure. Rest is part of the process, not a deviation from it. You are not falling behind because you paused. You are refueling so you can continue. She would remind you that integrity matters when no one is watching. The habits you maintain in private determine how you handle power, success, and recognition if they ever arrive. Character built in obscurity is what sustains visibility. She knows you sometimes wonder if anyone will ever truly understand your journey. Some people won't, and that's okay. You are not here to be universally understood. You are here to be internally aligned. She would end this part by telling you something quietly powerful. Even now, even in uncertainty, you are becoming someone stronger, clearer, and more capable than you were before. This stage of your life is not empty space. It is active construction, and whether you realize it yet or not, the patience you are learning now will one day be the reason you don't panic when others do. She would go on, because there is more she wants you to understand, especially now, when the world feels loud and impatient and constantly demanding proof of worth. She would tell you that not everything meaningful announces itself immediately. Some things unfold slowly on purpose, because if they arrived too early, you wouldn't yet know how to hold them without fear. She knows you've had moments where you questioned your direction. Moments where you wondered if you should settle, shrink your dreams, or choose what's safer just to quiet the uncertainty. She wants you to know that safety is not always peace. Sometimes it's just familiarity wearing a comforting disguise. Growth often feels unsafe because it asks you to trust yourself in ways you haven't before. She would remind you that clarity doesn't come before movement, it comes from it. Waiting to feel completely ready is one of the most subtle ways people avoid their own potential. You don't need a perfect plan. You need a willingness to begin imperfectly and adjust as you learn. She understands how deeply discouraging it can be when effort doesn't produce immediate results. She wants you to know that effort is never wasted, even when outcomes change. Skills transfer. Discipline transfers. Confidence transfers. Nothing you've learned disappears just because one direction didn't work out. She would speak gently about disappointment, because she knows how quietly it can erode hope. Disappointment doesn't mean you were foolish to believe. It means you were brave enough to try. Cynicism feels safer, but it slowly drains life of color. Hope, even when wounded, keeps you human. She wants you to stop measuring your value by productivity alone. You are not a machine designed only to produce outcomes. Your presence matters. Your perspective matters. Your empathy matters. The world often forgets this, but forgetting doesn't make it untrue. She would tell you that leadership begins long before anyone gives you a title. It begins in how you respond to pressure, how you treat people who can't offer you anything in return, how you behave when no one is keeping score. These quiet choices shape who you become when responsibility expands. She knows you've felt overlooked. She knows you've watched others get opportunities you felt prepared for. She wants you to understand that timing is not judgment. Sometimes life is simply rearranging circumstances so that when your moment comes, you won't have to betray yourself to step into it. She would encourage you to develop a relationship with solitude instead of fearing it. Solitude is where self-trust is built. When you can sit with your own thoughts without distraction, you stop needing constant external validation. That independence becomes a form of quiet power. She wants you to be careful with who you share your dreams with. Not everyone needs access to your inner world. Some people will unintentionally weaken your resolve because they speak from their own limitations. Protect what's still fragile until it's strong enough to stand on its own. She would talk about responsibility in a way that feels empowering, not heavy. Responsibility is not about blame, it's about agency. The moment you accept that you can influence your direction, even in small ways, you reclaim control from circumstances that once felt overwhelming. She knows you sometimes replay the past, wishing you had known then what you know now. She wants you to release that version of regret. You acted with the information, maturity, and capacity you had at the time. Growth changes perspective. It doesn't invalidate earlier effort. She would remind you that strength doesn't always look confident. Sometimes it looks like showing up on days when self-doubt is loud. Sometimes it looks like continuing even when excitement has faded. Commitment is what carries vision through the boring middle. She wants you. She would end by telling you the one thing she hopes you never forget, even on days when everything feels uncertain and unfinished. You are not here by accident, and your persistence is not meaningless. The fact that you are still trying, still questioning, still learning tells her more about your future than any current result ever could. She knows there are nights when your thoughts grow loud, when the weight of what you haven't figured out yet presses heavily on your chest. She wants you to understand that confusion is not failure. Confusion is often the doorway between who you were and who you are becoming. Clarity rarely arrives all at once. It arrives in pieces, earned through experience. She would remind you that you don't need to harden yourself to survive this world. Softness, when paired with boundaries, is strength. Compassion, when paired with discernment, is power. You don't need to lose your humanity to protect yourself. You only need to choose where and with whom you invest it. She wants you to release the fear that time is running out. Time is not your enemy. Rushing into the wrong life out of panic costs more than waiting for alignment. The pressure you feel is often borrowed from expectations that were never meant to be yours. Return them. She would speak to your sense of identity, especially if it feels unstable right now. You are not required to define yourself once and never change. You are allowed to evolve. What matters is not consistency of image, but consistency of values. Let those guide you when everything else feels uncertain. She would ask you to pay attention to the small signals of growth you tend to dismiss. The calmer reactions. The quicker recoveries. The moments where you choose clarity over chaos. These are signs that something in you is strengthening. Even if your circumstances haven't caught up yet, she wants you to know that you don't owe the world a performance. You don't need to appear confident, successful, or unbothered to be worthy of respect. Authenticity will take you farther than any carefully maintained illusion ever could. She would encourage you to take responsibility for your inner life. What you allow to repeatedly occupy your thoughts eventually becomes your emotional home. Choose inputs that expand you, not ones that keep you anxious, angry, or small. She understands that you may never receive recognition for some of the hardest things you've survived. Healing, restraint, choosing not to repeat harmful patterns. These victories are often invisible. But they matter. They change the direction of generations, even if no one applauds. She wants you to trust that your efforts are being integrated, even when progress feels slow. Life has a way of connecting lessons later, making sense of things that once felt random and unfair. What seems disjointed now may later reveal a pattern of preparation. She would leave you with a reminder about courage that feels quiet but true. Courage is choosing to stay open when closing off would be easier. It's continuing to believe in your capacity to grow, even after disappointment. It's refusing to abandon yourself. She would tell you that you don't need to chase extraordinary circumstances to live an extraordinary life. Depth, integrity, and consistency create impact that lasts. Loud success fades. Grounded fulfillment endures. She would look at you, not as someone lacking, but as someone in motion. Someone still unfolding. Someone capable of more than they realize, precisely because they have learned how to endure uncertainty without losing themselves. And with that, she would let the silence speak. Not because there is nothing left to say, but because she trusts you now to carry this forward. To take the next step without needing permission. To move steadily, honestly, and with respect for your own journey, whatever you are becoming.